My first attempt at painting this miniature didn't go so well, but I learned a lot from the mistakes that I made and I'm ready to try again. This time, I'm going to try painting an ultramarine. Even though I'm new to miniature painting, I actually do have a lot of painting stuff already because I used to paint Gundams. It's ironic that I used to paint Gundams and stuff when I lived in America, but now that I live in Japan, I actually don't do it at all. I kind of just fell out of love with the hobby itself and fell into love with Warhammer while I was here. It's just funny how life happens. So the first step that I did was add a nice even coat of Vallejo black primer, making sure to have a lot of control on the airbrush. The biggest mistake on my first attempt was adding way too much paint and too many layers, so I'm being extra careful to make sure to maintain as much of that detail as I can. With the primer finished, I then decided to go with a zenithal highlight using the airbrush instead of dry brushing it. I'm using Army Painter Matte White. I don't use Tamiya or Mr. Hobby paints because most of them are enamel based or alcohol based. After watching some useful guides on how to properly apply the zenithal highlighting technique, I made sure to keep my spraying arm in a fixed position and only move the model. I noticed that my angle may have been a little bit off when I first sprayed. But this is a learning experience and I decided to just add a little bit of highlights to the back of the model as well. With the zenithal highlighting done, I moved on to adding the base coat to the whole model. Most of the guides used contrast paint at this step, but I don't have any contrast paint and I can't really buy any at the moment. So I tried making my own. I added equal parts Army Painter Crystal Blue, Matte Medium, and Flow Improver. As I was spraying, I realized that spraying miniatures is very different from spraying Gunpla, because when I was spraying Gunpla with paint, all I cared about was getting an even coat of color on all the parts. But with miniatures, you're really having to maintain the shadows and highlights that I built up with the zenithal highlight. I was afraid of spraying too much blue paint and removing the shadows that I was trying to build, so then I dry brushed some of the base coat only on the spots that I felt like needed a little bit more color. In my last video, I think I really overdid it with the paint and with the pressure I used when dry brushing, so this time I was being very careful to only apply as much as I needed. Even though it's my second attempt, my confidence with dry brushing is a lot higher. By reviewing the mistakes that I made in my first video, I was able to target and practice those mistakes so I could improve quickly. After letting the base coat dry, I stopped for a moment to think about what my next step should be. I was having a hard time deciding whether or not I should add a wash and then highlight, or if I should highlight and then add a wash. I decided to go with using Void Shield Blue, my most saturated blue, and add the highlights first. Again, I was being very careful paying attention to the moisture on my brush, the pressure I was using, and the placement of my brush. The zenithal highlights did a really good job at giving me an idea of where I should put my highlights. Another thing I learned after reviewing my first video was how to properly use washes, and that they must be diluted. I had not realized this. Once I felt like the wash was at a proper consistency, I added it slowly and methodically to only the places that really needed it. I was also avoiding any coffee staining by moving the wash around evenly to apply a nice thin coat. Here I do something kind of frustrating. I drop the mini. This happened a few more times when I was painting, and it made me realize how important it is to have a proper holder for the mini. Whether it's a piece of cork, a 3D printed one, or something you buy from Games Workshop, I definitely need something better than just holding it like this. Besides that, I was very happy with my progress, so I decided to move on to a different color. I noticed that the holster and the pouches on his back were probably made of some kind of a leather, so I moved on to a brown. My main goal with this second attempt was still to have a paint job that maintained as much detail as possible. I made sure that the brown paint was thin, but not too thin. I knew I was going to have to do a few coats at minimum. I also decided to add the brown to a few other parts, namely the purity seals, because I wanted the purity seals to have a bit more of a weathered and ancient look to them, and pure white just wouldn't do that. The same as when I recorded my first video, for some reason everything with this webcam just looks to be a bit brighter and overly saturated. The white isn't nearly as overpowering with the naked eye. I was looking for a way to edit my camera settings, but it looks like this one just doesn't have the ability to do that. Hopefully I can find a solution to this before I make my next video. After being astounded by the OSL achieved by this painter, I decided I had to try it next. Imitating what I saw from his videos, I made sure to make the brightest points as white as possible. While I was waiting for the plasma pistol to finish drying, I figured I would also apply an OSL effect to the eyes. However, my fear of ruining my paint job that I was very satisfied with so far really made me apprehensive, and you can see in the video I'm really hesitant to add any more color to this face. But I remind myself that nothing ventured, nothing gained, and if I'm not pushing myself, then I'm never going to get better. And I immediately make a huge mistake. At this point, I was just so heartbroken because I was really happy with everything I had done so far, and I was just trying to think, how am I going to fix this? I took another look at the reference source that I was using, and at the bottom with all the different helmets, I realized that my model is a lieutenant, and they have this white and red stripe. I figured I could try doing that to fix my mistake. Pushing through my feelings of dejection, I just decided to put more paint on the Mini, because, well, that's the whole point of this hobby. As I was adding the white stripes to the helmet, I felt like I was honestly just ruining this more. After allowing myself to have a moment of disappointment, I took a deep breath and reminded myself that this is all about having fun, and I'm not a master painter. I put on some pure red from Army Painter, and as soon as it touched the white, I realized this actually may have been a really good thing. The red adds such a good contrast and focal point to the head. I felt so relieved and happy in this moment because I really thought I had ruined all my hard work, and, well, there are no mistakes, just happy accidents. It's true. But with that incident over, I realized that I've been painting for a long time and I was actually beginning to get really tired, so I wanted to try some edge highlighting and finish up this model. Checking my reference source again too, I noticed that some of the skulls were actually bone colored instead of gold, so I fixed that too. Satisfied with that, I moved on to the metallics. I tried the same thing as last time, adding on a little bit of shining silver, and then I'll go back again with some greedy gold. Gold trim is really not fun, in my opinion. Or, I dropped it again. It's just not very enjoyable for me. I'm not sure if it's the paint I'm using, so if you have any suggestions on maybe a better gold or a better metallic with better coverage that doesn't result in so much lost detail, I'd really appreciate it. After about 3 layers of gold, I was finally satisfied, and I decided that the last thing I should do is go back and add a little bit more blue on places that I felt like that needed it just a little bit more. Because of my little happy accident with the helmet, I completely forgot about my OSL attempt with the plasma pistol. But at this point I was so tired and ready to be finished that I just threw on some jungle green from Army Painter and called it a day. There it is, my second attempt, an Ultramarine's Primaris Lieutenant, and I love it. I cannot believe how good it looks. I'm really happy I decided to take the time to record the first video and actively critique myself to see what I needed to improve on. I think my biggest improvement has to be my dry brushing. It's really evident on the edges of the legs and other pieces of the armor. For my next model, I'm definitely going to focus on practicing OSL lighting. If you have any suggestions on good OSL lighting tutorials, please let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.